thank you so much for being here today. We don't have anybody online, so since it's a small group, do you want to just go around and introduce yourself so I know who's here and a little bit about you guys before we get started?
Sure. I'm James. I'm from the physical therapy program.
Awesome. Wonderful.
I'm Devin. I'm also from physical therapy.
Drag him along.
Good. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I appreciate you.
Adam Johnson, Office Research.
And then helps us make sure that the money is going where it needs to go and supporting you guys. Great.
And I'm Doug McGee. I'm the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. And I got something to learn here too. So.
And maybe I have something. I'm thinking, like, gosh, Doug is probably going to be able to give me a lot of pointers on this. So I welcome feedback. My name is Dr. Amy Weiss. I'm the Director of Research Development. And research development is a pretty new role here at ISU. It's only been around for about a year. And we've been doing it informally in lots of ways. But my office is the first office to really centralize these services. And my role here is to support research and researchers in ways large and small. So that can be everything from helping folks to find a grant and then they're off to the races. And sometimes it's really working in detail with faculty. So this will give you a sense of all of the different things I do. But what we're also going to do is apply some principles from teaching practice. And we'll just get into it. So one of the key motivations for this presentation and this type of work is that time is the barrier, particularly at schools like ISU. You guys have service expectations, teaching expectations, and research. That's a lot. That's a lot for anybody. And until we can make more time, we have to leverage our strengths in order to grow different areas like research. And also, I want to demystify the grant development process. For a lot of folks, grant development can feel a little new. Unless you had a really good advisor who mentored you on all of these things. I've met a lot of faculty and they start their jobs and now it's like, go get grants. And that's it. And so that's my role. And I'll also say if this is, yeah.
I was going to say, so I think I can speak for Devin as well, since we're the only two here, is that we're clinicians.
Okay.
Meaning that, I mean, we're professors, but we didn't go through like a PhD program where any of this would have been addressed. And so just so you know, that last bullet point would be fantastic, but we have no foundation upon which to build. Would that be accurate?
It's very mystical.
One of the things I'll say is it's complex. Sometimes that complexity lives in our own mind. We make it so often. I'm telling folks with grants, we don't have to make it that hard, and that's because we think we need to say something just totally mind blowing right out of the gate. But really, grant development is project management fully articulated with fiscal responsibility. So we'll go over some of these strategies and just know if you find this presentation valuable or other grant development services would be valuable, I can come to your department and do these tailored trainings. I can also work with you individually, so let me know what I can do to support physical therapy or partnerships with other campuses or different things. So the learning outcomes for today there's a handful. I want you to be able to define andragogy, explain how to use the principles of WIFM.
I was mispronouncing that word in my head, so. Andragogy.
How did you pronounce it? I could be mispronouncing it.
No. I just read it as the totally wrong word.
So androgyny. Yeah. I was thinking, maybe I should put a picture of David Bowie up here. But next time I know, I'll add the Bowie picture. Explain the principles of WIFM to increase the alignment of grants and the priorities of funders. Create measurable goals using Bloom's taxonomy. Apply the principles of backward design to improve project management. And the last one is use the flipped classroom technique to engage community members. So this is going to be really spanning teaching development and research development, using some of these keys. So a little bit about me and why I'm interested in this. My very first professional job in grad school, full-time, was at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at the Worldwide Campus. This was the building I worked in. Actually, just behind these windows was a fleet of instructional designers. I was based at the Rothwell Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. Everybody I worked with had a PhD or an MD or was in the process of getting one in education with an emphasis in andragogy. And it really changed the way I thought about grants and the approach I take to providing grant training. Because what I want to do is to make sure my training is tailored to the learner. And the learner is an adult learner. And when we're working with adult learners, we have to think differently about that. I have a 6-year-old, and we do, a lot of learning at home. But he's motivated by treats, external rewards, grades, praise. I mean, I can be motivated by treats too as an adult learner. He relies on us for guidance. We're starting off with the assumption that there's little to no experience. It's all scheduled, and it's being given in an expert to non-expert kind of model. Adult learning is totally different. Folks are self-directed. People know what they want. You're here for a purpose and want to get something specific out of this. You're motivated by professional achievement, particularly when it comes to grant development. We want to use and leverage experience. We want to use what you know and bring it into the classroom. And we really want to focus on problems and goals. And this, I think most importantly, I don't conceive of myself as a teacher. I think a lot of what I do is coach. I am coaching grant writers. I'm there for support. I'm there for resources. I'm there to be a team member on the project. And my role is to empower the PI to be a leader. And that's really what WIFM is all about. So this was the first principle of adult learning that I learned. It stands for what's in it for me. So it's important for teaching and for research. First, the most important thing that we always have to think about when we're writing a grant is, does it fit with the funding opportunity? So we're going to have a training in online with Grant Forward that will give you guys some specific tools to find grant opportunities. That's coming up in December.
It's on the first.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 10 a.m. online. So please go to that. That'll teach you all about using that tool to find grants. And if you're still struggling, reach out to me. We can work together on that. But once we find a grant and we've identified a funding opportunity, it's our job to show the reviewers that this is a fit. And oftentimes we just want to say it explicitly. We also want to connect it to larger issues. So we need to show the reviewers why it matters. We have to answer the so what for them. And we have to say, this is why it matters to you. So we need to know what they want. So just like when we're teaching adults, an adult learner wants to know what's in it for me, a reviewer wants to know what's in it. So oftentimes I think just state it explicitly. That's why I started this class with the learning outcomes, so you guys knew what you were going to get out of it. And it's important in grants to write with your reader in mind. Give them a sense of why they should care. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second. But following these principles implies that you should avoid jargon. Think beyond your discipline. Oftentimes reviewers, even though they might have some expertise in your area, they're not really going to have expertise in your niche. And so you need to write for a broadly accessible audience. So that's when we get away from jargon. We don't talk about things that are too technical outside of our methods. Those are going to be rigorous. And we want, if we can use a simple term instead of a complex one, that's great. Our reviewers are going to be, when they're reading grant applications, they tend to read a lot. And they have a short time to do it. And oftentimes it'll be a setting like this, where maybe you'll have a group of folks around the table, you might have 200 applications, divided among this group. And then we will each take a section, rank them, and then bring it back to the larger group and say, these are the ones that I think are deserving of funding. We'll then read those. So when you write, you need to empower your reviewer to be able to advocate for your research. And so that means keeping it simple and straightforward. So we want to say, I align with this mission in such and such way. Same with the connections of the larger issues. And I have some strategies for doing that. So first things first, just, sometimes, again, because we're so focused on the research, we don't read about the funder. Like, even for things like NSF, check out their mission. See, what are they interested in funding? They'll say in their mission that it's about advancing America's interests. So that means that's already telling us we need to be thinking big picture and we need to be able to articulate a national impact. We can't do that. That's okay. It just means that NSF might not be the right funder for us at this juncture. I create at least one clear statement explaining how our goals serve the funder's mission. And so let's look at an example. The MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust, they do a lot of funding for nonprofits and higher education all throughout the Pacific Northwest. And their goal is to build the capacity in nonprofits, driving innovation and sustainable outcomes across the Pacific Northwest. And their vision is human flourishing for the common good. People of all communities thrive in a just society and experience equity of access and equality of opportunity, enhancing the quality of life for everybody. And so just to clarify, a vision statement for an organization is our end goal. So that's the world we're trying to create, and our mission is how we propose to get there. So what we want to say is, how are our outcomes aligned with the vision, and how will we serve the mission? So how are we going to achieve their goal to bring their process of bringing the vision about? Any thoughts about your own work and possibly creating an alignment with something like the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust?
So when you flash that up there, maybe not so much for a research thing, but I guess you could spin research off of it, have this conversation, but we run, there's a student-run pro bono clinic in physical therapy, both here on the Patel campus and on the Radiant campus. And right now, it's just volunteers through the students and those sorts of things. And ISU is always talking about, how can we help the clinics be, they are supportive of the mission of ISU, but how can they be financially supportive instead of a cost? Absolutely. And so my thought was, man, if you could, there was enough money, could you just create this ongoing thing to just say, hey, if there was almost like an endowed chair, could you have an endowed, in our case, a physical therapist, and that way we wouldn't have to bill as much insurance per se to make it financially feasible, but that it would be just like, hey, if you need physical therapy services and you're from an underserved community, come in and see us because the building's already here, it's going to be here, and now we have money to pay for the therapist, so it doesn't become a cost on the ISU students.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think, for this, you could say specifically, when our universities serve the community, we make everybody's lives better. And, doing that is going to flag for the reviewer, they wrote our website. There is an alignment here. Because they're looking, they get every grant opportunity will get far more applications than they have dollars to provide funding. So if you start off in that way, I think that would be a really strong initial match. And when I see that, I think, okay, let's keep digging. For a Murdoch grant, I think there's opportunity for this. They might not want to fund an existing program, but if there was, say, a new partnership with Hotel Free Clinic and Genesis Community Health, and we were creating a referral network between, that would, I think, be of interest to the trust. And that's something I can maybe work with you and coordinate with you if you are interested. Yeah. but that's a perfect example. Already thinking about how do we speak in their language, and I think you were doing a great job of that. A lot of times when we write our grant, we don't have a lot of space to motivate it. So when we go back to the what's in it for me, one of the things we talked about was aligning it with the NOPA, but also with larger issues, so issues people care about. So if we go back to your example, thinking about access to physical therapy, one of the things we know is that in the rural parts of the country, there are very limited access to resources. People are older, sicker, poorer, and with more chronic conditions as a result of those initial first three. So if we were writing then the proposal for a group like NORDOC, one of the things that we would want to do is start by talking about an issue that they care about, because they might not know the particulars of why physical therapy is important. And if we can start with one of these big picture issues, so we know everybody's going to know some of this information about why we struggle to access high quality healthcare in rural America, and then we can narrow it down. Well, one important aspect of that is physical therapy, which is maybe not covered in an insurance plan. And the typical patient needs maybe 20 visits or something like that, but only 12 visits are covered. I know in my plan only 6 were covered. And so, again, like, we also need to create more physical therapists. And so you can talk about a story starting with something that's big and broad that everybody understands is important. Connect it with the mission of work, endeavor, and the funder, and then keep narrowing it down to your focus. And this is my framework for thinking about how to get started in writing this as a grant. I think it's I always like to give the caveat, every grant writer will have a different approach, but this is how I do it. And it's basically the same. And what I'm doing is hand-holding my reviewer and just showing them why it's important and why their dollars are going to be impactfully spent when they work with us. Does that make sense? Do you guys have questions about that? So yeah, the vision is connect it to the funder, explain what is in it for them. They want the most benefit, they want impact, and they want mission. And so when we use a framework like this, starting with that big issue, connect it with their mission, connect it with what we're doing, and then show that our particular project is what we need to do to solve the problem. By that point, they should be bought in, and the rest of the application is just explaining. And in my experience, this is one of the trickiest parts for researchers because we tend to be focused on the minutiae. Okay, Bloom's taxonomy. So this brings us right to the next part, right as we've motivated our grant, we know what we want to do. Now we have to start articulating this in terms of goals. What are our project goals? So the funders want to know how you're going to define success. And if you have a vague objective, that's just going to make being able to say whether or not you were successful that much harder. Here's an example. Students will understand mentorship at the end of this lesson. Understand can mean a lot of things. Are they going to define mentorship? Are they going to be able to practice mentorship? Are they going to be able to break down mentorship into discrete, actionable activities? Or maybe none of those things, maybe something else. And if I can't say exactly what the student will get out of it, then I don't know how I'm going to assess them. Or in the case of the grant, I don't know how I'm going to assess myself. And if I can't assess myself, and I'm not successful, or I can't say what success means, then my funders not going to be able to either. So that's one of our jobs. And the way we're going to do that is by using SMART goals. And SMART goals, you guys have probably heard of this: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time. That's all well and good, but when you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, but how do I write this? I think Bloom's taxonomy is a really great way to start. Before we dive into that, I just want to distinguish a few things. Goal, objective, outcome, and impact. Sometimes we use these terms interchangeably, but for the purpose of a grant, they're really quite different. So our goal is our big picture aim. Our objective are the discrete steps. So a result that will happen by, that will be achieved through the project, and an outcome will be the specific change that happened. The impact will be the broader change in the community. I think this is just such a great example of what those will look like in the context of the grant application. So in this case, big picture, they want to reduce teen pregnancy. They're going to implement a program. They anticipate 9 out of 10 high school students will in this program, and as a result, teen pregnancy rates will fall. The grant application will then detail, why they think that's going to happen. Maybe the Bright Futures program has been effective in other contexts, so bringing it to this location will be new. But these are really strong examples also of SMART goals. So it's time bound, they're feasible, we can measure them. So we're going to come back to goals and objectives in a minute. Bloom's taxonomy. So these are a way of understanding the cognitive development of learners. And he breaks it down into 2 sections, declarative and intellectual. So declarative knowledge, this is the introductory skills. So think facts, information. These are our recall skills. Who was, what is that formula? What date was this historical event achieved on? Summarize what you read. So they can show that the student understood, by which we mean they can make meaning of the information, and that they have the recall. They can remember what they learned. It also includes higher level concepts, so intellectual skills. And these are broken down into 3 subcategories: create and organize, evaluate, and analyze. So these are the higher synthetic learning skills that we are really focusing on in the university system. And of course, applying. Extra credit, we can think about Fink's taxonomy. So these are other ways of learning beyond some of the synthetic skills. So Bloom's taxonomy was developed in the 50s, and it's great, but it's old. Fink's taxonomy is newer, and it thinks about all the different ways that we can learn. So beyond the classroom. So we might be volunteering, we might be, as it says here, learning how to learn, looking at the human dimension, integrating things in important ways. So this is what it all looks like when it's put together. The Fink's taxonomies are at the top, Bloom's are here on the left. I'll show you another thing with just Bloom's taxonomy, but the thing that is so helpful is when we're trying to write our goals, objectives, and outcomes, and we're thinking, well, what do I want to be measured? One of the things we can do here, I sometimes just print these out and have them on my desk when I'm writing grants. So when I worked as a grant writer, that's what I did. And I just kind of peruse them, and I ask myself, okay, what's the big picture? What are we trying to achieve? And typically for higher level work, we're up here in this create column. So before coming here, I was the director of health at the United Way of Southeastern Idaho. We did a lot of advocacy projects. We did a lot of community resource projects, so really designing new solutions to complex problems in a space that was difficult for other nonprofits to work with. It wasn't financially lucrative. So we could have our goal statements up here. So we're creating, developing, designing a new program. And that program might work by introducing, identifying an issue, measuring something. So these, I think, are just, it's a great database of words to pull from to make sure that whatever we write in our grant is going to start off being measurable. And these are also skills you guys can use in your classroom. This is the same set of skills. If you're doing this when you write your syllabus, you already have the skills you need to work on a grant. So let's revisit the mentorship example. What would be a better way using Bloom's taxonomy? So this is just another way of showing it, that we could create a statement, an outcome about mentorship that could be incorporated into a grant. like, here's an example. One of the things, say we're mentoring graduate students, PhD students, one of the things that we might want to teach them is how to teach. They might need to be working. So we're gonna say that senior students working in our lab will have the opportunity to collaborate with 2 undergraduate students. And so the collaborating and the 2 is going to be our measurable outcomes, so we can say whether or not they did on a project. And that's something that we'll be able to then report back to the funder and say this was achieved. And they'll be able to know, yes, that was indeed achieved. We can have them, let's see. We can have them do poster presentations where they're explaining the information or working on podcasts as a method for maybe doing broader impact. Okay, well, we'll move to the next one. Okay, backward design. Anybody heard of backward design before? Yeah.
Is that like re-engineering or?
Yeah. Yeah, and well, maybe not re-engineering, but it's a.
Or backwards engineering, like
Yeah.
taking something from the end point and then following back.
Exactly, it's that idea applied to education. So backward design starts with your learning outcomes. And then what you do is you work backwards. So you get your learning outcomes and then you think, what would be a meaningful assessment of these outcomes? How will I know? So say I want my student to be a strong mentor. How will I know that they've achieved that? And can go back and use Bloom's taxonomy and start getting the creative juices flowing. But we can also we can do that, and we'll then move on to design our assessment strategy. And so we can say, okay, well, if they're a strong mentor, they should be able to, or if I wanted them to teach mentoring, they should be able to define it. They should be able to outline a mentorship strategy. They should be able to describe the particulars of the relationship that they should have with the student and what's appropriate and inappropriate. So and maybe I want them to show me that by, at the end of this course, delivering a mentorship statement that covers all of these topics. So that's my assessment. And then I already know if I'm going to teach each of these components could be what we're working on together as a group. So you work from your learning objectives to your assessment strategy to what you actually do. One of the things that I think is so important about thinking about backward design with grants is we're doing the same thing. So again, if you're doing this when you're in your classroom, you're already using the same skills you need for a grant. And what I mean by that is you are, as you manage your learners' outcomes, that skill can be translated into project outcomes and project management skills. So one of the tricks is using active verbs. Connect your outcome with the measurement process. So in the case of learning outcomes, you're clarifying what you will assess and why. In the case of grants, you're helping the reviewers to understand your plan to assess the success of your project and adjust this. So backward design is project management. The first step of getting the grant is writing it. We had to sit down and plan what that looks like. Grants are a lot of work to put together. This is an example of one I'm working on with Jonathan, my husband. He's the chair of the art program, but he's also working on a national endowment for the humanities grant. And this is the project management tool I use. So I outline all of the components of the proposal, everything that needs to be done. And the first thing I do is put the due date here at the bottom. And then we work backwards. What are all of the things that we need to do to get to this due date? We start assigning dates, and then we can start looking at responsibilities and say, who has the skills to do this? But the same thing, what we need to do is understand where we're going and then work backwards from there and how we're gonna get there. And if we work together in a proposal, we can develop, I think, guys can develop these types of tools. Backward design can also be valuable as you outline your project for the proposal. So you can have your, again, your endpoint, so our impact or the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We can articulate those in terms of specific objectives, assign roles and responsibilities, assign benchmarks, and work backwards and start saying, okay, how much time do we do this? And that will give us a sense of how feasible the project is and how hopefully we will be clearly explaining this throughout. But it's a really great way to start building this out. Typically, grants will give you a certain amount of time in which to do work. You'll have a year, 6 months, 5 years, and you'll need to be able to articulate how you're doing everything and when you're doing everything. Also, the creation of a logic model. This is a logic model I created for a plan called Ride United. And what we did was provide free transportation resources to community members in need. And this was a brand new pilot project when it was first launched. And so there were launching and redesigns, and this was a visual way of representing to the funder how we were producing new knowledge as we did this. And backward design helped us. So we knew eventually we were going to scale this. We started it just with one location with the Hotel Free Clinic. We worked out kinks. We found out that there were some problems scheduling rides to the homeless shelter, for example, because of their admissions process. So before we scaled it, we had to fix the admissions process. We would go back, try again, we find other pain points, redesign, relaunch, expand by one, same thing, new pain points. And anyway, this was using the backward design principles, starting with our goal, working in our assessment process, and then developing our actions, I thought was a really helpful way of managing it. Okay, last one, flipped classroom. Has anybody done the flipped classroom before? Yeah, a little bit? So flipped classroom is a great way to think about our broader impacts. So for those who don't know, the traditional classroom is a lot like what we're doing now. You just somebody at the front and they're like, I'm an expert and I'm teaching you all these things. When we would reinforce it with homework, it's, we're gonna grade, come back to me with questions, revisit this. A flipped classroom works totally differently. The student does a lot of their learning at home. This is a great tool for adult learners because they're self-motivated. And then the classroom is the site of application and applying lessons. And it's used this technique is used to promote active and engaged learning. So flipped classroom is a great mentality to think about for broader education. In part, that's because what we're doing is pushing knowledge out into the world and then asking learners to actively come back, ready to participate. One of the things when we do research, we have to ensure, we have to have a plan within our grant to ensure that the research is not just ending when the grant funding ends, and that the knowledge can exist beyond the lab, beyond the principal investigator. We traditionally do this through publications and presentations, but more and more, we've got to get really creative about how we apply this. Particularly in the health sector, we know when we apply it, we're going to make impacts for patients. So this is an infographic I pulled from the Center for Broader Impact But here's my recipe. And you do this for writing a grant. You define the community that the work is going to benefit. We create an outreach strategy to share the results of our work. So that can be traditional methods like publications, presentations, We can do social media outreach, engagement with traditional media, create a story, and then invite the community to build on your findings. You can do that by hosting a conference that's maybe designed not just for academics, but for a more intellectually diverse population, so people with different backgrounds, different abilities. When I got started in grant writing, we were working primarily with a population that had comorbid experiences of homelessness and profound mental illness. And we always involved them in our research. And one of the ways that we shared results afterwards was we did publications and they were invited to participate on that. But we also started every conference with art show that allowed them to give their experience of participating in research and sort of own the space and set the stage. And then we would have community-based discussions about policy solutions that were informed by the results. And so they were active in interpreting the results and helping us to structure something that made sense for that community because they're the ones who live in this community. So finding ways to do that and to bring the community in can be a really effective way to expand the impact of our research. And in the context of those discussions, we can develop plans to actualize the results of those discussions. So bring about meaningful policy change, work on developing a new set of procedures in the community, or a variety of things. But really the idea is to put the person who is conceived of as the learner or the receiver of knowledge into the driving seat and to co-create with them. I think more and more reviewers want to see that kind of information and broader impact. So the community is being actively engaged and there's a symmetric sharing of information, not just a one-way street. So that's what I had for you guys today. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think, does this resonate in terms of in terms of your teaching practices? Do you feel like you can apply some of your teaching to research skills? This is my first time giving this, so I'm open to feedback as well. What worked, what didn't work.
Sure, I would say it's different than what I expected.
Okay.
Reading the description, I thought it was going to be more about, hey, you're already doing these things in your classroom, not generally speaking, and how do you now cross-apply those skills to grant writing. I thought it was going to be more about, hey, you're doing these, this is how you could turn what you're doing in your classroom into a research project.
Gotcha.
So I probably misinterpreted, but this was also helpful. Yes.
So that's good to know. Maybe I need to rethink my abstract.
Yeah, so.
Okay, no, that's great. I appreciate that.
I was sold on his description of it, so.
Yeah, I dragged him along with my description, so now it's, you got a second hand, but did you still find it?
Yeah, I still thought it was good and to get some exposure to the grant writing process, because that's something that I'm like, ooh, I probably need to think about that step. And so it's good to have some exposure to it because it is mystical.
Yeah.
Right, like how do we go? So the thing, and it's probably because I'm so green in this area, is it's like, okay, I can see that there's a process, using some of the designs of a good teaching instruction to applying for a grant. I'm still kind of at a loss of like, how do I even find this?
Okay.
I'm not even, this is almost like one step beyond where I'm at. It's like, oh, I just need to even find
Your first one.
yeah, like an opportunity that would match with things that I'm trying to work on.
That's helpful. Yeah, I appreciate that. So go to the training on December 1st.
It's on my calendar.
Email me afterwards though, if you feel like I still want help. Like, because we can sit down together and work through it. Or if you found a couple and you think like, how do I tell what's the good one? One of the things you're gonna find in Grant Forward is there are tons of opportunities. What's the one that we go after? How do we know this one is going to be the most effective, or are we tailoring our approach correctly? maybe we need $10,000, and we want to make sure that they, they say they fund up to 10,000, but a lot of funders will fund up to 10,000, but maybe their standard grant is 2,000. Now we have ways for finding out that information. That are fun, like searching their 990s on ProPublica, stuff like that. So anyway, building all those skills.
I will say that I'm excited that this sort of, like, that your office, this sort of resource exists, because there have been times in the past where I've just said, I have this idea, can you help me? And the answer's been, oh, we don't do that. And so I was like, well, then what do you do?
Right.
Because but it was more what I think is within your job description. So it's like, okay, once this is managed, we're making sure that the money's going where it's supposed to, and that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. It was what I felt like the answer I got in the past. And I was like, well, that's fine, but I'm not getting to that point without some additional assistance. So I'm grateful that this, what it sounds like your office does exist.
Yeah, good, okay. And my job is really to support you guys wherever you're at. So there's no problem too big or too small. So good. I'm glad that we made that connection too, because it's a new service, and as faculty, you guys have, at least from my perspective, there are some years where you're really busy on service, and some years where you're really busy on teaching, some years where you have the availability to do research. And that's always kind of how it works. It's like research can fit in when we have the time, when we know, and so I really hope that what I can do is help make it easier to take advantage of the limited time you guys have to do research.
And I would say in our program, I mean, you're using some years, our program is probably like weeks or months, because it's a lockstep program. We're taking a set number of students in all the time. It's not like, oh, this year we had, 5 PhD students, so this next year we only had 1. We are taking 48 every year.
Wow.
And so it's just, so time is a challenge.
It's precious.
So yeah, having support to be able to, know where to go and look, or be able to say, hey, I have this idea. Those are the sorts of things that I need. And then, like I said, I don't know if you would take this as a suggestion for one in the future. It's just like, because we do have a department chair currently who's much more, and I would say in the ISU physical therapy program, one of the longstanding complaints has been a lack of seasoned mentorship to be able to go through. And so we have historically done a build your own sort of thing. So it's like we hire clinicians, and some of the clinicians, they'll go through and they will get an advanced degree, but many may not. And but our current chair has a lot of experience in there, probably went through it in a more traditional way. And so he's been telling us, it's just like, yeah, you're already doing things in your classes that you could turn into projects. So just do it, because at present, and I would say, I guess the other thing I would say that I feel like as physical therapists, we're regularly, I guess on a principal level, dealing with things that are less than ideal. So we just figure out a way to make it work. And so having somebody that maybe has that, that research background to say, man, you're doing all of this stuff already, you could turn it into this. I don't even think that way. I just think of like, well, this was something that was neat to do, and look, it worked out. And so my brain doesn't even go there.
Yes.
And so I would say having that sort of resource to help make those connections.
I would say that's similar to my experience, where it's like, I'll have there's a problem. It's like, oh, well, here's my solution. And it's probably something that could be developed into a legitimate research inquiry, but I don't even think about that, because I just need a solution. I need a solution, and I need it now. And
I was chuckling at your slide that said, I was counting how many months. And I was like, I need to be better at operating that way, but I'm usually like, oh, this is the issue now, let's fix it.
Really, that's when you're working with human beings, especially students who you know, they're living life on their own for the first time or whatever, and that those are the issues come up and they have to be addressed, you know, they don't have that right away, it's like I think that like some of the social issues, like housing insecure, you know, and they need somebody to talk to about it. Being a student. One of the things I don't know if you saw this email, so all the grant emails that come out come from me. And I sent out the email announcing, the Healthy Idaho CTRD Clinical and Translational Research Award for the development track. So we, along with Boise State, were just awarded this, so we're co-eyes with them. It's the first one for Idaho. And I wanted to flag this for you because coming out of this will be a number of training programs focused on translational research. Thinking about how we bring research into clinical settings. And so as clinicians, I think you guys will be really on the front lines of this type of work. And there are going to be some developmental get into research awards. So that means I just keep an eye out for the emails. I'm going to be along with John Holmes, the point person for those grant opportunities here at ISU. So as they come out, if you see something that's a CTRD and you're interested, reach out because that might be a great way for us to get started. And there will be really cool resources. There's a statistics core that can help with that component of the project, which is usually a place where we can just run into challenges because that can be technical and time consuming, and PIs don't always get with do the work of a biostatistician plus all the work that they need to do. So just want to put that out there as a place where we might also find some opportunities to move along.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And there will be, funding opportunities that come along with it here at ISU.
I think this is a really great overview. Thank you, Amy. I'm kind of wondering, like, for a lot of us, I think, you know, we don't even know what's possible. This kind of gets, I think, to some of your comments of what's possible for grant material. I'm thinking a little bit more specifically, like, for example, are there grants out there where it's like, I've got this research question, I don't have the funds, but it's a really great research question. I'm gonna conduct the research and then that's the end of the grant, but I just need your help to get it going. Or are they thinking more of it as these are kind of startup funds for something that we hope will be self-sustaining down the road? I mean, where is a good starting point for sort of framing what is something that will get funded? I mean, are there things that are just kind of one and done, or is it all intended that we're going to provide you with the funds to get this thing started, but then it has to be sustainable on its own down the road?
Yeah, Deb, that is such a good question. And, you know, I think the answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
So there are variety of is the alignment piece. We want to make sure that we find an opportunity where those objectives are aligned. So if we're looking at, for example, the Murdoch Trust, they have a vision to create sustainable nonprofits, so we can already tell sustainability for them. They want to make an investment and then see you go forward with it on your own, like have a way to continue. Other places, they know, if you're getting from NSF to do a research project, and you get a career award, for example, that's a research for a highly competitive research award for junior investigators. And they know you'll get that career award and hopefully you'll get more grants. But you don't necessarily need to say, like, this is how the research will be sustained. Because they know the plan.
You have to identify, like, here's what we think the research will be used for.
Yeah, you do want in those cases to say, what the trajectory will be, because it's a career grant focused on your professional development. But smaller grants they might have some reporting, they'll want to know what your outcomes are, but typically this is all matched to the size of the award. So a $50,000 award is going to ask for fewer outcomes than a $500,000 award. So a $500,000 award, they're going to want to know what the impact was in the field, the patient, and the mentorship and the broader impact beyond all of that. But a $50,000 award, they just might want to say that you did what you said you were going to do, you can maybe produce a white paper, and then you're going to expand on it. Yeah. I mean, they usually want the idea to live after the grant in some capacity, but that will vary based on the type of award. Typically for researchers, what they want is to be a piece of the puzzle and solving a big problem.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Thanks so much for hosting that.
Yeah, glad to put the space to use.
Yeah, it's fun. And so I had originally, when I worked at Embry-Riddle, developed this idea for a presentation. And my husband got the job out here in Idaho.